Hello, friends. Part 2 of our podcast on section 5.6 in the Algebra 2 book. We just finished using the rational zero theorem to find all the possible solutions to a function where the leading coefficient was 1. And you should be comfortable with that. And of course, you know the problems are going to get more complicated. So before we go there, I want you to pause this podcast and see if you can identify all the possible numbers that could be a real zero for this function, okay? And we know that the leading coefficient here is 1, so I don't really have to worry, but it's going to be plus or minus the factors of one of these terms, all right? So which term do I look at? And once you identify which term it is, write down all their factors, so plus or minus, and of course 1's going to be 1, so I'll give you that one. So pause this and see if you can find all the possible numbers that could be a real zero for this function. All right, now that you've done that, let's take a look at a more complicated one. So notice in this case, my leading coefficient is 8. So that is where I get all the possible numbers that could be the denominator of the fraction, and my constant is 3. And all those factors are the ones that could be on the top, all right? So all the numbers that could go on the top are there, and all the numbers that could go on the bottom are here. So let's look at where that came from. The number 8. I need a little room to work here. The possible factors of 8 are 1, 2, 4, and 8. Those are all the numbers that go in. And look what you see here. Here's 1, 2, 4, and 8. And for the number 3, the only factors are 1 and 3. So I have to take the 1 and put that over each one of the possible denominators, and then the 3 and put that over each one of the possible denominators. So the only numbers that could be real zeros for this function are this list right here. Plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3, plus or minus a half, plus or minus 3 halves, which is 1 1/2, plus or minus 1/4, plus or minus 3/4, plus or minus 1/8, plus or minus 3/8. And what I've got to do is I've got to test until I find one of these numbers that gives me a remainder of 0. And once I find that, I'm going to be able to factor that term out and then use what I know to find the other factors. Now, a good strategy before I even start this is to take a look at the graph. So if I go to my calculator and I hit y equals and I punch in the equation for this problem, which is right there. So pause the podcast and type it in if you need to. Then I hit graph. Now what I've already done is I've already hit zoom 6 and set my window to show me all of the critical points in the graph. So this is a skill you're going to want to work on. If you can't do it already, we'll work on it in class. But I hit zoom 6 to see where the graph was, and then I tweaked my window so that when I actually looked at it, I could see all of the critical points. Now let me tell you what I mean by critical points. Now here's this graph. Critical points are this. I know because it's to the 4th power, and that power is even, I know that my end behavior is going to be the same. So both ends are going to either go up or down. So in this case, I know it's going to go up because it's a positive 8 right there. Now critical points are this. This is a relative minimum because it's a low point, a relative maximum, and then a relative minimum again. So when I graph something, I know there can only be 1 minus the highest exponent of critical changes in direction. So I want to have all of these showing in my graph, and I just tweak the window till I get a good look at the graph. And by hitting the trace key, I get to look at the equation I actually typed in, which is right here, and I can move that cursor along and find any points that I want. So this is what I'm looking for, is where are these zeros. So the reason I've showed you this is that this gives me a good guess by looking at these points, these zeros, where is a good place to start guessing. All right, so that looks like maybe negative 1/2. This looks like maybe negative 3/2. This looks like maybe positive 1/4 or positive 3/8. This looks like, well, I'll leave it to you. So see if you can pick one out of this list that goes in evenly, that gives me the 0. And of course they show you that negative 3/2 works, and we'll go from there. But this will get you started. We'll see you Monday.